Cricket Last Shows with me, Neel Khagram. Today we're joined by John Buchanan. John, how are you doing down under?
Yes, pretty well, thanks, Neil. Certainly I'm healthy, and most of the people around me and family are all healthy.
So let's start where it all began for yourself. So you're born in Queensland. You played a few first-class games, 7, I believe. But can you just talk about your early childhood, how you got into the sport and your playing days?
Yeah, sure. A while ago now, but I grew up in a country town in those days, which was Southport, which is about 80 k's, 50, 60 miles south of Brisbane. But in those days, it was a country town, and I was fortunate that my parents sent me to a private school, which is same as your public schools, I think, boarding school called the Southport School, and in those days it was 500 odd students, of which about 300 or 400 were boarders, all coming from Western Queensland and northwestern New South Wales, from properties mainly. And so, yeah, I mean, it was a wonderful school, wonderful facilities, and certainly cricket was one of the sports that it excelled in over a long period of time. Although, having said that, the school was devoid of premierships for some time, and by my time of leaving school, which is grade 12, I was to play in the first 11, which won the premiership for the first time in 40-odd years, 44 years, in fact. But my passion was probably born out of my father's love of sport, but also love of cricket. He really enjoyed his cricket. We would travel with other friends from the Gold Coast up to Brisbane, the Gabba, and sit in the stands and just watch games of cricket. And I guess it entranced me. I just fell in love with it. And part of that was that, players were very, very accessible in those days. And I guess my dream was to play, obviously, and wear the baggy green, So I've followed that through school days and then at university. And then, as you said, eventually, I played one season of Sheffield Shield cricket for Queensland, which was during the Packer era. And, as I say to a number of people, I made 160 for Queensland. In fact, my first innings for Queensland was 60-odd in then the Gillette Cup one-day series. David Boone was just that was his debut game as a young 18-year-old out of Tassie. And, so things started rosily. And then I said, well, as an opening bat, I made 160 for Queensland. But if probably a few people know, then if you delve into the statistics, it shows that probably took me about 12 or 13 or 14 innings to make the 160. So it wasn't necessarily a successful opening bat, but it certainly continued to whet my appetite about the game. But my dream then burst, of course, that I was non-contracted once the Packer Series players came back, and it was time to move on and do other things with my life, which was getting married and getting a real job, so to speak. That took me away from the game for quite a number of years, albeit that I did stay in touch by doing a bit of coaching, and then as my children came along, I became their coach.
You also came over to the UK, am I right in saying?
That's
you
right.
had a time in the Lancashire leagues, in Hyde up north, and you also played for Oldham as a player coach. A little word on that period?
Yes, yeah, no, I was about to say that one of the really enjoyable periods of cricket was being this professional cricketer, and that kind of led into me playing for Queensland. But I had 2 seasons with Oldham in the Central Lancashire League as their overseas professional, and reasonably successful. The second year, we created a double that the club hadn't done, I guess, for 40 or 50 years, and that was winning the championship plus the one-day title, the Wood Cup. And midweek, I'd travel down to Cambridgeshire and play in the minor counties. And again, just a wonderful experience. And second season, my wife-to-be came over with me, and we travelled down together, but we'd also a companion in the back seat, West Indian by the name of Derek Parry, who played a lot of cricket for the West Indies. And yeah, just it was a fabulous time and wonderful memories.
And then when you eventually got your role working for Queensland in the 90s, at that time, did you have to get coaching badges? What was the kind of qualification, or was there a qualification to become like a coach? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so when I was on my way to becoming what I hoped was going to be this professional cricketer and Australian cricketer, I was going through university. So I did complete a degree in what was termed human movement studies, which is really physical education. So I had that in my back pocket, and I guess that gave me an insight into athletic performance. And not that I necessarily used that immediately, because I went into sort of sports administration, then went into being an academic and teaching, and then into government. But at the back of all this, I did have this, I guess, physical education background, and there were a couple of administrators in Queensland Cricket at the time that wanted me to stay involved with the game, which I did. So they put me through the various levels of coaching accreditation. So by the time the Queensland job came around, I had been coaching in club cricket back at my old club university. I'd spent a bit of time doing coaching in different sports, I suppose. And what I discovered was that even in business and even in government, I was actually coaching. I was bringing just a team of people together and creating something special, hopefully, that we're all pretty keen to try and achieve. So, in a sense, that was the message I took to Queensland Cricket when they advertised the role in 1994, that while I couldn't compete with Jeff Thompson, who was the coach at the time, couldn't compete with his cricket pedigree, obviously. But what I thought I was bringing was a real sense of coaching, a real sense of looking at things differently, a sense of not being the technical expert, if you like, or somebody with a bit of technical expertise in the area of cricket, although I could play the game. But I was now bringing a different perspective on the way to look at the game, the way to train. We introduced computers for the first time in cricket, and probably in sport, just about in Australia. I think the only other person that was going along the same lines was Bob Woolmer in South Africa at that time. Yeah, it was just coming into this coaching role, but with a completely different background and a way of looking at it.
Yeah, then you had great success. You had 5 years as the head coach of Queensland, winning 2 Sheffield Shields. As a Queensland man yourself, proud moments?
Well, it was. I mean, exceptionally so, because Queensland had never won a Sheffield Shield. They'd been in the competition 69 years, and my first year we were fortunate enough to win the Shield for the first time, and that probably ranks as, in terms of coaching, my highest point, I guess, because in anything in life, I think, no matter whether it's sport or business or politics or just friendships or whatever it might be, if there's a first, it's something special, and that was, and it's still very vivid in everybody's minds. But yeah, no, it was a good period of time. We won 2 one-day championships. We won 2 Sheffield Shield victories in that time, and I guess that was a bit of a platform for them heading into the Australian job.
And then just talking on your role at Queensland, and you talked about the philosophies. In your opinion, the captain and coach relationship, how important is that, and how did you find that as in that specific role, and then moving forward?
Yeah, look, I think it's essential. The captain and coach have a very, very good, strong relationship, or one of them dominates the other person. So it's one person really takes the running while the other is there just to support. But generally, I found in the teams that I coach with, it was a good relationship with the captain. It was a reasonably equal relationship. And so, yeah, always exceptionally important. It's the same in business. That CEO, chairman of the board, really need to operate, collaboratively most of the time and be on the same page. And then same for the CEO with the COO or the CFO. So they're really, really critical relationships if I guess you want some sort of sustained success, and if you want to chase successes that are continually sort of raising the bar.
But then actually on the field itself, who would you say is in charge of the team? Would you say it's the captain? It's their team?
There's no doubt it's the captain. There's no doubt, that it's the captain. I mean, the coach's role, certainly in cricket anyway, really finishes sometime before the start of play, and really then it's over to the captain with the coach providing what support may or may not be needed at certain times, but it's really the captain who runs that particular competition or event. Whereas, in the short duration sports, football sports, the rugby codes and so on, the coaches obviously have a completely different role. Netball, where they make decisions on the run to impact the game by removing players, substituting, changing tactics, whatever they need to do to somehow forge a win.
And then after Queensland, you got the one-year role working at Middlesex. As you said, this was just prior to you getting the Australia job. So that small period working at the home of cricket, how did you find it? How did that come about?
Yes, well, it was sort of between my fourth and fifth year for Queensland, and I guess by that stage I'd worked out that, in my view, there is a shelf life for coaching, and so I didn't see myself, certainly after year 5, necessarily going on too much further with Queensland. And I was fortunate that I received a call from Middlesex. They said, we've seen what you've been doing over there, and we think Middlesex need the same sort of changes here. And that particular year, which was 1998, Mike Gatting was stepping away from captaincy, and I think he'd been captain for 15 years, and handed over to Mark Ramprakash at the time. And so I agreed to, because it was going to be a challenge, which is something that I like. And it seemed, in a sense, a little bit similar to what I had experienced with Queensland, that a successful team, or in this case club, but for the time being hadn't reached the heights that they possibly should be reaching because of the facilities or the players that they had, or the expectations, I guess, both internally and externally of the club. So I went over and we got things underway. That particular time, the 3 English players, Angus Fraser, Phil Tufnell and Mark Ramprakash, were in the West Indies with the England side. So we did our pre-seasons and so on, got everything ready, and that, which was great. However, when Mark came back, he strongly disagreed with the approach we were taking, and I suppose there was a bit of a portent to what happened a number of months later. But I suppose at the time I believed it was an opportunity to try and work with Mark to get him to understand what we were doing here, or what I was trying to do was, 1, help him, but 2, again, try to get this club up and running as quickly as possible, back to winning a bit of the silverware. But anyway, that didn't work out, and it goes to your question before about the captain-coach relationship. Our relationship deteriorated as the season went along, and that really created lots of tensions and conflicts within the team. And ultimately, Middlesex probably performed worse than it had done for some time. So it wasn't a surprise when the board kind of asked, me what I believe the future should be, and I said, well, there's not room for 2 of us here, and certainly having just appointed Mark Ramprakash as captain, there was no way that they were going to go back on that decision. So, it was tough at the time, but I look back on that, and again, it provided me some really good lessons, good insights into coaching, good insights into people, good insights into culture and so on, and all those things that either you learn from going well or you learn from things not going well, all become part and parcel of your coaching approach, your coaching philosophy, your coaching values, principles, and so on.
Yeah, I was going to ask because you mentioned it was tough. So, for example, if a player gets dropped, there's a lot of talk about their mentality. They start questioning their abilities. Did you question yourself? Because obviously you had the success with Queensland. This was probably your first stumbling block. Did you question your philosophies in any way, or was it just a self-belief that this is the blueprint and I've had success before and this is the way I want to move forward? What was your thinking at that time?
Oh, look, I think any person that's sort of very keen to try to deliver their best self almost every day, no matter what the role, no matter what the job, will always doubt themselves, I think, or at least question themselves, will at least question why you do something, why you make a decision, you go about the way that you go about things when there might be easier ways to do it. I mean, for me with Middlesex, and it was the same eventually with Knight Riders in India when I was in the IPL, the easiest thing for me to do was to agree to both Mark Ramprakash and Siran Ganguly's way of going about running the team and running the team culture. But if I was to do that, it meant that I had to compromise my values and my principles, and I was not prepared to do that. So they were the reflections that I took away from those instances. I mean, I think everybody will be in different situations and will have to make those calls themselves at their own moment in their own life, But for me, the job was not worth compromising, what I believed in and my value set. So, it meant that I did doubt that, and I did ask myself a lot of questions. And certainly my wife was wondering what the heck I was doing by really, tossing in what was just a wonderful place, being at the home of cricket and Lords, and being involved in county cricket. Again, that was very, very special. But, it wasn't to be, but there were lots of, as I said, lessons that came from that, which helped me then in my future roles as a coach, and certainly have helped me in my current role as a coaching and leadership consultant in terms of being able to, see that and be able to talk through that with either leaders or leadership teams or, just individuals who sit within a team and wonder what their leaders are doing sometimes.
And then in 1999, Australia win the World Cup. Jeff Marsh then leaves his position. How did it come about in terms of you getting the role? I did a piece with Mickey Arthur, and he talked about how he got the role with Australia, how he had to give a presentation, etc. How was it back when you were at your time?
Yeah, oh no, definitely presentation to CEO and board members. And, there was probably two front runners, myself and Steve Rickson at the time, and Stephen Moore was captain. And so, most people believe that, the Blues boys stick together, but, from Stephen's point of view, he does. He's a very avid New South Welshman, a very avid Blues supporter, but what he is a person that, his mantra was to take the road less travelled. And so what he was looking for was, again, something different, something that challenged the existing system, something that challenged the existing players, something that challenged the way the team was operating. And so in his mind, he didn't, I think, want just your traditional coach. And no disrespect to Steve Rickson, who's been a fantastic coach in all the places that he's been, but he comes heavily out of that, very similar to Jeff Thompson in Queensland, just a very, very strong playing background. and that's his bent and his bias, and that's how he approaches things. But mine was again different to that, insofar as I wasn't necessarily there to be a heavy-handed coach. I was there to support Stephen, but I was there to challenge the whole group to be far better at themselves, first of all, and then their contribution into a team, and then where could they take the team. So it was always, my job to keep challenging, but also at the same stage to kind of make myself redundant, so to step out of it and provide the players with an environment where they could really extend themselves.
One of the main things looking out, the Australian team had this philosophy of being very aggressive on the field in terms of aggressive field placings, scoring at a higher run rate than was traditional back then in Test cricket, banishing night watchmen, etc. Was that all part of the culture shift that you brought in?
Yeah, look, I certainly was part of that, but as I said, Stephen was very much a part of that as well. He was very much a driver of doing things not the same way as everybody else, and for me, it was about, well, how do we change the game? And so that's why I think we complemented each other very well. We were always he from definitely on-field perspective, and me looking at on-field, but trying to work out how we do those things off-field to get ourselves prepared to do them on-field. And so it wasn't just about career playing, for me it was about the whole person as well. So as I said before, just challenging people to be better cricketers, but also be better people, or at least more rounded people, be able to live outside the dressing room, if you like, be able to do things other than just talk about cricket, try to broaden your horizons, take in new experiences.
And if a player challenged that kind of philosophy, what was your response to that?
Well, you've got to be able to take both sides, because just because I think that's the right way to go, it doesn't mean it's necessarily the right way to go. It doesn't mean it's necessarily the right way to go for somebody at a particular moment in time. So I was always encouraging people to challenge the system, and I was part of the system. I was part of a coaching system, a team system. And so that that would regularly happen. That would happen in meetings, and we know one or two people who would do it probably a little bit too publicly sometimes. But that was part and parcel of, I guess, my philosophy. That you are there to give people that opportunity to question things, no matter who the person might be or what the system is, and feel in a sense free to do that, without it being foolish and without it being, a waste of everybody's time. So, and that was an environment that, you had to understand that just because I'm the coach, I'm still one of the group and therefore still subject to the same rules as everybody else.
And then when you look back over your Australia career, what were the standout moments? You have so many great times, winning the 2003 and 2007 World Cup, 70 out of 89 tests, only lost 6 out of 35 one-dayers, 3 Ashes series. What were the kind of standout moments for you? Winning away. We forgot to say even that. Was it like winning away in India in 2004 for Australians had doing 36 years? So many times.
Yeah.
And
Look, probably all of those things. I mean, there's a photo behind me there of the 2003 World Cup winning in Johannesburg, which was amazing. But I suppose all those things you mentioned are sandwiched in between 2 bookends. The first was the first Test match that I was involved in, which was in my hometown in Brisbane against Pakistan in November '99. And while I didn't fulfil the dream of putting a baggy green on and being able to walk out there as a player, I was able to walk out there on the field as coach of this Australian cricket team, and then be able to sing your national anthem in front of your family and friends was just something amazing. And I suppose then, as you recounted all those various victories and triumphs. But it was again the last game. The last game was, a World Cup win against Sri Lanka in Barbados, and we'd played exceptionally well through that tournament. It capped off 2 World Cups for me, and undefeated. We weren't beaten in one single game in either World Cups. And it was a bit of an anticlimactic finish, that particular game, but nonetheless, there we were sort of on that stage and being able to hold a World Cup, but just walk around, the field with players and acknowledge the crowd. It was very, very special, because I'd already decided that was going to be the end some 20 months beforehand, and it was just a bit of a fairy tale finish.
And then if you actually look at your win percentage in numbers, it's up to 79%. And if you compare that to other coaches in other sports that have been given great credit, you look at Vince Lombardi with the Green Bay Packers. I think his win percentage was up 73%. You got Sir Alex Ferguson. He was at 58. I know it's different sports, but if you compare in terms of numbers, do you feel as if you get enough credit?
I don't think, again, that was ever and still isn't one of the things that I do in coaching. Coaching in the end is just about trying to help individuals be better. And then if you're in a team environment, you're actually trying to help a group of individuals be better and hopefully achieve something pretty special while you're there. And I think, the cliche, but the biggest thing that coaches get, it's lovely to win. There's no doubt about that. It's great to be in a winning dressing room, and it's great to achieve records and so on. But I guess the biggest thing that a coach can do, like a teacher, like a parent, is that somewhere that you've helped one of those people that you've been associated with be a little bit better, either as a person or as a cricketer. You've had some influence, and that's I think the biggest accolade that I look for, or so the credit, no, but having said that, it was about 8 years, and we were a pretty amazing group of individuals who formed a pretty remarkable sort of record over that period of time.
Then on the flip side, does it disappoint you that certain members of the team post-playing have come out and kind of questioned your role in that great side? Probably the most vocal would be Shane Warne. Does it disappoint? And a word in your relationship with him, obviously regarded one of the greatest. But, a word on that relationship?
Oh, no. Yeah, no, look, I mean, even through the period that we were, doing what we were doing, there will always be critics, because no matter how good a job or how bad a job you're doing, there will be some people who like you and like what you're doing. There might be other people who are really resistant or dislike what you're doing, and there's a mixture in between. So that will always be the case. I suppose what happens when you move into an international side is that you are exposed to far more into the media, and there's far more introspection on what it is that you're doing and how it is that you're going about things. And then, of course, media really do like to find stories that they can keep alive, and often those are personal and can be unsavoury at different stages. So no, I mean, you'd love everybody to love everything that you do and like everything you do, but the reality is that's not going to be the case. So, but with Shane, I mean, we just came from really different backgrounds. I mean, his view on coaches, well, was said there at one stage, it's what gets you from A to B. And I think he just an incredibly gifted player, and possibly didn't realise how good he was, even though he did some amazing things. But I think his view was that the type of coach needed to be someone, like Bobby Simpson maybe previously, or an Alan Border, those type of players who had played a heck of a lot of Test cricket and therefore had that street credibility, if you like, about playing the game. And, so from my point of view, I never professed to be that because I wasn't that, and so, but what I did try to bring was, the ability to challenge Shane in different ways, and hopefully found ways that could happen, and hopefully found ways that, he really took up the challenge and was part and parcel, or one of the small parts and parcels of his incredible success as a great of the game.
And then obviously we've got to talk about the 2005 Ashes, regarded as one of the greatest series of all time. Didn't go your way, Australia's way. A word on the preparation, though. I had a little interview as well with Stuart McGill. He kind of questioned the preparation. He talked a lot about the De Bono thinking caps, winning, and then decision making during the series. Obviously, the second Test match, winning the toss at Edgbaston with Glenn McGrath slipping on the ball and still deciding to bowl. A word on the preparation and that whole series. You didn't take England lightly, did you?
I think we did underestimate. I think that was one of the features in terms of preparation. My recollection was that we decided as a group, and maybe Stuart McGill wasn't part of that group, but we had played a lot of cricket, I think, prior to that series. So we had decided to just get away from it for a while and then come back, just prior to the series, and then use the early games in the overall campaign as a way to get back into the series. Now, in hindsight, probably wrong move, because certainly most of our quick bowlers were well underdone, and probably some of our batters as well. So while the break was mentally and physically good, probably skillfully, we were a bit behind the eight ball, and so then that kind of coincided with losing to Bangladesh in our first one-day game, then losing to England, which gave England a little bit of impetus for what was to come. And we kind of started along through those one-day series and got through them, but certainly weren't playing anywhere near our top. There were a number of other issues that sat in behind what was going on the field. We'd had, my assistant coach, Tim Nielsen, who was just an unbelievably skilled assistant coach. He wasn't with us because it was a joint decision that he leaves the team so that he could prepare himself to become the head coach when I finished up. So he went and really did some career development, which was very good for him. But from a team perspective, he was one of the connectors, one of the really important pieces to the puzzle. Had a new coach in, Jamie Siddons, great coach, but he didn't have the same connection. And what I'd done then was, because of that, kind of removed myself a little bit further to enable him to get closer to the players. We had a new physio, new trainer on. We had some conflict with various partners on the tour, a couple of injuries. So when all those things are going on, it can become a little bit unsettling. And then on top of that, England were playing much better cricket than I think we thought they were, albeit that we rolled them in the first Test match at Lord's. And I think Michael Vaughan quoted many times saying that if we had sneaked across the line in Edgbaston, then the series was gone. There was no way back for them. But that gave them the lift that they were looking for, and the crowds were just incredible. So when you are in sport and you're on the field, you often talk about, if you're away from home, trying to keep the home crowds quiet because of the way that you're playing. Well, the way England was playing was just bringing them into the game all the time. So it was an amazing series, no doubt. But we just went on song. And again, I look back on that series and I know that I just wasn't coaching anywhere near the way or the way that I believed I could. And that was again another contributing factor to us just not being able to probably put ourselves in the best possible position to win games. We got in position to win games, but not in the positions, I suppose, that we were used to. And then England were able to counter that and get the 2-1 lead going into the 5th Test match.
And then you also talked about earlier your relationship with Steve Waugh. During this period now, the team's under Ricky Ponting's leadership. Your relationship with him, was it a good one?
Yes, no, we had a very good relationship. Again, obviously Ricky had been part of that team under Stephen Waugh till 2002, where Ricky then took over the one-day captaincy from Stephen when we were in South Africa. And then Stephen remained on, obviously, as Test captain till 2004, at which time Ricky took over. So, we spent a fair bit of time, I guess, together and kind of knew each other reasonably well. And a slightly different leader in approach to Stephen, but nonetheless, led by example, a real tough nut, a team person, proud of being an Australian, and brought all that to his own game, but also into his leadership.
Yeah, so the back end of your Australian career, you get the 5-0 whitewash against England down under, win the World Cup, and then you took on an ambassadorial coaching role. Am I correct in saying? What was the actual position you took up post in head coach?
Yes, yeah, there was for a year or so with Cricket Australia. It was basically just that, talking to other coaches about coaching, which I still do, of course. Most of the coaches now sort of sit within a corporate atmosphere, but I still get involved with mentor coaching where I can, and really enjoy that. It's nice to be able to observe others and maybe pass on some thoughts and experiences which coaches can choose to use or not. So but yeah, that was for a year or so, and sort of coincided when I was over in the IPL as well. So good experience.
Yeah, talking about that, I know we talked about it earlier about your time at Kolkata. Now, in terms of the differences, obviously it's a franchise team, players coming in and out. I know there was some differences between Sourav Ganguly, etc., as we talked about. But in terms of establishing that philosophy with it being a franchise, did you find that difficult?
Yes, I did, because again, even though the Australian team only comes together in competition, you are with them for an extended period of time. So it could be 14 months, but at least you're with the team, in and around the team for something. When I was coaching anyway, around 250 to probably 270 days a year. So you're pretty close to the team. Whereas the franchise, we were together for an 8-week period. And it was sort of in hit and run games, day, night, lots of Bollywood influences. And so your capacity, I think, to build something in a short time frame was not necessarily easy. And then we had owners, Sharuk Khan, who's, Mr. Bollywood really, and he did have a really good vision for the franchise. He wanted to be something like Man United, but in the cricket world, and that was exciting for me. But in my mind, to do that, then we needed a number of pieces to be put in place, and of course the auction where you get your players bought in, is one of those ways of doing it. And my view was that we probably didn't necessarily buy well, even though we bought some very, very good stars. We didn't necessarily buy well in terms of building something into the future. But nonetheless, it was just an incredible experience again to see the first game of IPL in Bangalore, and then Brendan McCullum tees off with whatever it was, 156 or 158, and fireworks going off everywhere. That again was just a memory that's forever etched in my mind.
And just a word on that relationship with Sourav Ganguly. There's a lot of talk about this whole dual captaincy thing. Is that correct? Am I correct in saying that? Was that the kind of the differences? And
well, yeah. Look, what I mean, with Sourav, and I said the same thing to Ricky Ponting, who was part of our franchise at the time as well. I just thought the game, this T20 game, had passed them by, or their skills were in the past. 4 years earlier, they would have been absolute dynamite. But, just their game wasn't necessarily built on power. Surav's fitness, his running game, was certainly not something that fitted nicely into what T20 was demanding. And I just believed his decision-making in terms of what was needed on the field quickly was reactive, not proactive. So, and we had these conversations. I had them with the owners. So come the second year when we did replace him as captain, I did believe, though, that we could get better team involvement by using a leadership team who would combine together to make the calls. And so we had Brendan McCullum as our nominated captain. Brad Hodge was there then, and then we had Chris Gale and Sourav, and that was our sort of leadership group to work out ways and means of winning games and combine out on the field, albeit that there would be one person that had the C beside their name. But in the end, that really didn't work, and it didn't work for a range of reasons, I think. Basically towards the end of that second season in 2009, the other owner came to me and said, "Well, we're not winning here, so basically thanks for your services, but you're no longer required," which was again obviously disappointing, but in a sense understandable. Not getting the results during this cutthroat business of a T20 tournament, and of course the owners, just are amazing people in terms of the Indian culture, and so important for them to be at least winning, or at least being able to hold their heads very, very high and proud people about their teams. And we were just, we were very star-studded outfit, but just couldn't put together results for them.
And then 2010-11, when England tore Australia again down under, you took a consultant role working for the ECB. How did that come about? Obviously, England won that series. Can you talk about your actual role?
Yeah, look, sometimes it's a bit overplayed, but obviously I knew Andrew Strauss because of the time at Middlesex, and we got on pretty well there, and sort of stayed in touch, not closely. But Angus Fraser was a good friend. We'd stayed in touch for some time. So it was probably as a result of them being involved with the England setup that they wanted to have a bit of a chat about how do you play in Australia, how do you win in Australia. And Andy Flower was coach, and I've known Andy again through our games against Zimbabwe. So yeah, it was a role that I sort of enjoyed in terms of helping them plan how they might go about not only preparing to play there, but how they'd go about playing it, from the itineraries to where test matches possibly should be, how they prepare for certain conditions. Lots of I guess planning, of which I'm sure they took some of that on board.
So would it be fair to say it's more kind of external factors as opposed to, say, like a player analysis kind of
Oh, well, there's no doubt that they asked about certain players, and I could give them some insights, but ultimately it was up to them how they could then either exploit those insights or choose not to use them at all.
And then a word on that England side that did win. Was it just a case of a team coming together, knowing their roles, and ultimately executing when it mattered? Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, again, our confrontation in the Ashes in 2005. There's a lot of things going on in both dressing rooms, and England, I think, came to that series well prepared. And I think if you listen to Andy Strauss talk about it, they had to do more than talk. They had to act straight away, and Brisbane was their first test. And again, as I recall, things didn't start off well, but they were able to turn that around, and then they had some very, very good players in their side who were performing. They performed, whereas Australia, possibly, again, a bit like us, and I don't know the insides of the Australian team at that point in time, but maybe they just weren't quite on their game. And, once England got a bit of a roll, then it was quite difficult to obviously to stop. And, they just found ways to get stronger, whereas probably the Australian team were finding ways to be less themselves than what they would have liked to be.
And then from there, you took a director of cricket role working for New Zealand cricket. What are the comparisons like when you compare New Zealand cricket and Australia cricket as a kind of establishment setup, etc.?
Yeah, well, New Zealand, basically the poor relation. I mean, they're just a small country. Therefore, population is of cricketers is certainly a heck of a lot less than it is in Australia, and Australia a lot less than England and so on. But their resources in terms of facilities, money, and travel, etc. It's all a different game over there in that respect. When I got there, their players' association had become quite a strong and powerful group. And while they were doing some really good things, I think, for New Zealand cricket at the same stage, they were creating New Zealand cricket, if you like, a lot of headaches as well. They worked out a relationship that benefited certainly the players who were playing for the Black Caps. And the depth then is always a critically issue. So if there's injuries to a few key players, then those whom you draw on are either very young or very inexperienced, or both. So it was it's always a bit of a balancing act for them to try to put forward a really strong team and sustain that over a period of time.
But then you see their success in the two World Cups, obviously getting to the final, unlucky not to win the last one. So in terms of their kind of team spirit, etc., do they have something special about them, that kind of intangible that one can't really put your finger on? Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, even in my time, we'd always find New Zealand a tough sort of one-day outfit, and we obviously had a pretty interesting test series against them in Australia as well. But yeah, no, they're always quite innovative, quite creative, always looking for ways and means to find chinks in the armour of their opposition. And I think that's just born out of the fact that they do, in a sense, like an underdog tag, and are to some degree, as I said before, quite under-resourced. So that they have to be therefore quite resourceful when they're looking at playing teams or playing certain games, and that's what they do. They do that really, really well. And yeah, you would think most of the time they really do get the best from the players that they put on the park.
And how would you sum up your time there? There's a lot of talk about the whole captaincy thing with Ross Taylor, Brendan McCullum. Just a word on that.
Yeah, John Wright was the coach at that stage, and it did turn into a bit of a charade, really, because I think it was quite a bit of a presidential election. They both had to put presentations together, and we'd sit in the room and listen to them. And obviously Ross was given the vote from John because it was John's decision, and Brendan missed out. Two different personalities altogether. I've known Brendan from IPL days and also playing against him, and Brendan's a risk taker. That's what he does. Whereas Ross is far more conservative, and obviously different personal backgrounds as well. That lends itself to the way that both of them conduct themselves, publicly and privately. I think. There were things going on with coaching staff. There was a change of CEOs and so on. And eventually, with the change of coach, came a change of captaincy. And that never sat with me very well. Not necessarily the decision, although I probably didn't agree with the decision, but it wasn't necessarily the decision. It was just the way that various people went about orchestrating the decision. But anyway, that's all water under the bridge, and I was able to have a reasonably enjoyable time there, and I think laid the foundations for some of their successes, in years to come, because again, we really tried to target the one-day format, but in doing that, and improving that, it really gave them confidence and built a group of players that were able then to compete in the longer form of the game as well. So, there's some remnants of that still around. So that's always good to see.
And then when your time ended there, you moved into your own coaching business? A word on that?
Yes, look, I'd started that business even before I left the Australian team in 2007, because as I said, I knew 20 months out that I was finishing up with the Australian team. That's if I was given the opportunity, I was going to finish at the World Cup in 2007. So I wanted to take the lessons that I'd learned along the way as a professional coach, plus everything that I'd done beforehand, and then be able to take that into the corporate world and help other leaders, CEOs, leadership teams create a high performance environment for their organisations or their businesses. So that was already on the ball. So even when I was in New Zealand doing New Zealand cricket, in a sense, I was employed through my business to do that. And so, that's what I've continued to do since I left the Australian team through New Zealand, and now to where I am today. So it really revolves around much the same as you see in the background. It's trying to create, well, my term is what's your Everest. So Everest was a term that I coined with the Australian team, and Everest was generally about trying to change the game. So that will always be a discussion with business leaders and businesses, so everybody exists in your own marketplace, in your own industry. So why do you want to play the same game as everybody else? Why wouldn't you be looking to play a different game, albeit that you've got to still stay within rules and regulations? But how do you create this competitive advantage? You won't do it by doing the same thing as everybody else does. And so that's kind of the starting point. And then we talk about individuals, we talk about leaders, and we talk about the team, and we work our way from base camp, through game plan to your actions and behaviours to hopefully the summit. And you keep reviewing that because it's about continuous improvement. So in a nutshell, that's what I talk about in the consulting game.
If an opportunity ever came up again to work for an international team or another club, franchise, etc., would you consider it?
No, I don't think so. I think my time is well and truly done. And I quite enjoy, as I said before, if I get the opportunity to mentor and sort of be right in the back drops with coaches or people in that environment, really quite enjoy doing that. But no, the whole workload that goes into being a head coach is just incredible, and I don't think that I've got the energy anymore to do that. And if I don't have the energy, then I won't be able to have people chase their Everest. And if I can't do that, then you just lose the respect and your own credibility within the playing group, and that'd be a terrible state of affairs.
Then how do you see the game overall right now? And in terms from a coach's perspective, do you see the game moving forward, whether it be specialist head coaches, so a head coach specific to a longer form test team, then the one-day team, etc., or do you still see there being like a one head coach and then filtering down from there? How do you see the game moving forward?
Yeah, look, pretty interesting question, I suppose. But I think there'll always be a short format of the game and there'll be a long format of the game. And at the moment, in the short format, there's T20 and there's one-day cricket. In the long format, there's red ball and there's pink ball. So, I think ideally, you'd have a coach for each, a head coach for each, and then sitting above that is really your head coach. But whether or not associations or organisations can afford to do that anymore, I doubt that. We've seen what's happening in Cricket Australia. I'm sure England cricket is a little bit the same. Certainly other cricket nations around the world and other sporting nations around the world, or sporting franchises or clubs around the world, have all cut back on staff simply because, it's just grown out of proportion probably, and now they can no longer afford it because, there is the sport on, there isn't the broadcast rights available. People are now preferring to stream it if they can, and be consumers in a different way. So, no, I think it will still see possibly less specialist coaches in terms of running teams. But I think what is and will change and has been changing is that the really short form of the game, T20 game, is where children and people who consume the game will come from, as opposed to when I was growing up, you came from the long format of the game. So you came from Test cricket and gradually you kind of weaned yourself onto the short form of the game. Well, I think in the future it'll be the other way around, and I think the T20 format, possibly the 50 over format, although it may vary a little bit, that's where people are going to want to consume and learn and interact with the game of cricket. And so therefore coaches and so on and administrators and everybody else have got to, I think, since understand that that's the foundation of the game. And then what's required, if you want to play long format, then you've got to work out how you adapt those skills to the long format, as opposed to the way it was before, that you adapted your long form skills to the short form. So I think that, to me, is one of the biggest changes that everybody will need to address. But that will be dependent upon, as I said, the ICC making some really clear decisions about where all these things fit. there are so many variations now. With South Africa developing a new form of T5 or whatever it's called, England with their 100-ball game. I can understand why they're doing it, but it's just confusing the whole marketplace altogether. And I think the ICC is, rather than being a toothless tiger, it's going to have to assert itself and make it very clear about what are the formats of the game that they believe are the most important formats for broadcasters, consumers, players, officials, and so on.
And then just to end on, if, say, for example, a youngster came up to you and said, "Coach, give me your best piece of advice," what would it be?
Like everything in life, you just got to enjoy what you're doing. So if you want to play, then play to enjoy it first of all, and keep the enjoyment. If you play to enjoy it and keep the enjoyment, then like anything, you'll just work exceptionally hard at getting better and better and better, because it doesn't feel like working hard. It's just something that you really enjoy doing. So, that's always, I think, the most important thing. Just keep enjoying what you're doing, and probably you'll be tested at certain times. So cling on to why you enjoy playing cricket, because that's the essence.
Perfect. John, thank you very much for your time. Brilliant to talk through your career. And yeah, all the best for the months ahead.
All right, Neel, thank you, and same to you over there. And yes, we all hope that things certainly don't get worse than what they are, but it'll take a little while for us to get on top of this thing. But if everybody's in it together, then we'll beat it.
Yeah, stay safe also.
Just like any good team.
Yeah. The Neel Khagram, Cricket Last Stories, John Buchanan. Thank you.